They called her cursed, a girl born beneath a shattered moon. Sold for silver. Left to die in the snow. But the night she met the Alpha King, everything changed. Because he wasn't there to kill her. He was there to claim her. And when fire met frost, the world remembered what it meant to burn. They said she was born wrong. Born beneath a broken sky, when the blood moon split open like a wound and bled across the clouds. That night, the livestock died, the rivers turned black with silt, and a child took her first breath, her cry echoing through the frost-bitten valley like a curse. The midwives crossed themselves, muttering prayers. Her mother refused to hold her. Her father didn't name her until sunrise. They called her Eira Thorn, but most whispered another name when they thought she couldn't hear. The Eclipse Child. Years passed, and the whispers never stopped. When she walked through the market, people moved aside, as if she carried plague. Children tossed stones, chanting songs about her hair, white as bone, and her eyes, gray like winter water. Some claimed she froze the air when she breathed. Others said she carried death in her blood. Her father, Thane Thorn, once a merchant of modest fortune, had long since sunk into ruin. The mines closed, the caravans stopped coming, and what silver he had left melted away in the taverns. Every debt collector in Ravenglade knew his door. And when the snows came early that year, they came for payment. Eira awoke to shouting. Boots stamping outside. The sound of metal striking wood. Open up, Thorn. The dues are due. Her father stumbled from his chair, reeking of ale. His eyes darted to her, then away. Go to your room, he muttered. Father, who?
Now.
But when the door burst open, the men in furs were already inside. Two of them grabbed her arms, ignoring her protests. Wait, stop, Eira cried, kicking against the frozen floor. One of the guards, a broad man with a scar across his jaw, grinned. The debtor's daughter, eh? The one the old priest called moon-touched. Heard, she don't even bleed red. Her father didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor. The scarred man tossed a leather pouch onto the table. The Lord Magistrate's offering a fair trade. She'll fetch a good price at market. Eira froze. Price? Thane's hand shook as he reached for the pouch. The clink of silver filled the silence. It's only until spring, Eira. Once I pay them back. Sell me? She whispered. You'd sell your own blood? He flinched, but said nothing. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the sound of wolves through the valley. By midday, she was dragged into the square, wrists bound in iron cuffs. The sky was white and heavy with snow, the air so cold it burned to breathe. People gathered, traders, peasants, even the priest of Ravenglade, eager to see the cursed girl sold off. She stood on a wooden dais in the market center, her hair whipping like pale fire. The iron bit into her skin until her wrists bled. The auctioneer's voice rose above the murmurs. By decree of the magistrate, property of Thane Thorn, female, 19 years, unwed, unblighted. Offered for service, labor, or other purchase. Someone laughed. A witch for a wife, perhaps. Another called, I'll pay 3 silvers if she'll stop staring at me with those ghost eyes. Eira said nothing. She'd learned long ago that words only fed their hunger for cruelty. But inside, something cracked, a silence so deep it roared in her ears. Her father stood at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in his threadbare coat. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. The auctioneer raised a staff. Begin the bidding. But before a single coin could be thrown, the air changed. It began as a low vibration beneath the snow, a sound too deep for human throats. The wind died. The torches flickered blue. Then the crowd turned toward the northern road. A rider approached. The horse was black as volcanic glass, its hooves striking sparks from the frozen cobblestones. The rider wore armor of dark steel trimmed in white fur, his cloak sweeping behind him like a shadow made solid. Around his neck glimmered a chain of moonstone, symbols of the ancient houses long thought extinct. Gasps rippled through the crowd. By the gods, whispered the priest. That's him. Who? Another asked. The Alpha of Duskborn. the Wolf King of the North. Even Eira, who lived far from the world of nobles and beasts, knew that name. Kale Ardent, a warlord who commanded both men and monsters. Said to be born of wolf's blood and divine fire, a being who could turn storms to ice with a word. He rode straight toward her platform, dismounted without a sound, and faced her father.
"Thane Thorn," he said.
His voice was low, cold, and carried the weight of command. "You have something that does not belong to you." Thane stammered, bowing so fast he nearly fell. "My lord, this girl. She's nothing. Just a servant." Kale's gaze cut through him. Liar. Then his eyes turned to Eira. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single glance. Her pulse slowed. The air thinned. His irises gleamed like molten metal beneath snowlight, and for an instant, she thought she saw stars moving inside them. "Show me your wrist," he said. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I command it." Eira raised her shackled hands, and the symbol beneath her skin caught the light, a faint crescent intertwined with a flame, pulsing like a heartbeat. Kale's jaw clenched. Who marked her? Thane blinked, sweat freezing in his beard. It's a birthmark. She's cursed, not marked. No, Kale said softly. She is claimed. The Alpha reached out, gripping the chain that bound her. With a twist of his hand, iron shattered. The links burst apart like glass. Gasps erupted through the crowd. Eira stumbled, half falling, but he caught her. His gloved hand closed around her forearm, steadying her. The instant he touched her, the mark ignited, silver fire burning beneath her skin. Kale's eyes widened slightly. "As I thought." "What are you doing?" she breathed. "Who are you?" He leaned close enough for her to feel the frost of his breath. "Your fate, apparently." Then he turned to the crowd. "This girl is no property of man. She bears the blood mark of Linares. She belongs to my line, my pack, and no one lays claim to what is mine." A murmur swept the square, half fear, half awe. Eira jerked her arm free. "I belong to no one." Kale looked down at her, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Not yet." Then he pulled off his cloak, black wool lined with white fur, and draped it around her shoulders. Warmth flooded through her bones, dizzying, disorienting. The gesture was unmistakable. Among wolves, that was not protection. It was a claim. Kale mounted his horse and extended a hand.
"Come Eira torna."
Her father called after them, voice breaking. "Wait. What about my debt? What about my silver?" Kale turned his head slightly, and in that single glance, Thane Thorn went pale as chalk. "Consider it paid," the Alpha said. "In soul." The horse reared, and they were gone, swallowed by the blizzard. The villagers watched in silence as the snow closed over their tracks. And as the wind howled through Raven Glade, Eira heard something whisper, not from the world outside, but from somewhere deep within her blood. "You were never meant to be theirs." The storm swallowed the world. Snow fell so thick it blurred the line between sky and earth, and the wind howled like a wounded thing. Eira sat bundled beneath Kale's cloak in the back of a sled drawn by wolves that could have passed for demons in the half-light, massive beasts, their coats rippling silver in the dark. Every exhale from them billowed clouds of frost. Across from her sat Kale Ardent, the Alpha King of the North, though nothing about him looked kingly in the way she'd imagined.
No crown, no finery.
Only steel and silence. The rhythm of the wolves' paws against snow was the only sound between them. Eira clutched the edge of the sled. Her wrists still bore the raw marks of iron. The fur around her shoulders was warm, but her chest felt hollow, gnawed by the echo of everything she'd lost in a single morning.
Her home.
Her mother's quiet humming through the walls. Even the cruel familiarity of the townsfolk's stares. All gone. She turned to the man across from her, the one who destroyed the world she knew with a word. "Why me?" she said finally. "Why take me at all?" Kale's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. The whites of them reflected the snow, making them seem not human, but lit from within. "I could ask the same," he said quietly. Why were you born under the blood moon? That's not an answer. It wasn't meant to be. Her fingers tightened in the fur lining of his cloak. You think that mark means something. That I'm what? Some prophecy come to life? Some tool you can use? Kale finally looked at her. Not a tool. A warning. That silenced her for a heartbeat. A warning of what? He gestured toward the night sky, where the broken remains of the blood moon hung like shattered glass. Of what happens when power forgets mercy. She frowned. That's not an answer either. He gave the smallest of smiles, sharp and humorless. Then let me be clearer. That mark on your wrist, it belongs to the Linares bloodline, an ancient order that vanished when the moons broke. They were the bridge between flame and frost, between mortal and divine. Their blood was a covenant, and their power almost destroyed the world. Eira glanced down at her wrist. The faint crescent and flame shimmered beneath her skin, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. You expect me to believe I'm descended from gods? I expect you to survive, Kale said. Belief can come later. She let out a breath, white mist curling from her lips. And if I don't, then your fire will consume you, and everything near you. The words struck like stones in her chest. You talk like I'm a weapon. Kale's gaze didn't waver. Perhaps you are. They fell into silence again. Only the wind spoke. After a while, the storm began to thin, revealing glimpses of the tundra, rolling plains of white, punctuated by spires of black ice. In the distance, mountains rose like teeth. The landscape was merciless, ancient, and endless. No human could survive here alone. How far? She asked, her voice small. To the Frost Keep? His tone softened slightly, like he was measuring how much she could bear. A few hours more. The wolves know the way. Why take me there? She pressed. What do you want from me? Kale's eyes glimmered faintly as he answered. You think this is about want? The blood mark doesn't ask permission. It binds. It called to me the moment it awakened. She laughed bitterly. So, now I'm some glowing chain tied to your fate? Convenient for you. Kale didn't flinch. Inconvenient, actually. I didn't plan on claiming anyone tonight. Then unclaim me. His expression didn't change. That's not how the bond works. Iris stared at him, anger mixing with the cold. Then how does it work? He met her gaze fully this time. His eyes were not kind, but neither were they cruel. They were ancient, too old for any mortal man. It means our fates are tied. The fire in your veins is the echo of mine. If you die, I burn. If I fall, your light goes out.
Her throat went dry.
You're lying. I wish I were. Eira turned away, hugging herself tightly. She didn't want his warmth or his riddles. She wanted her life back, the small, painful, ordinary one that didn't include destiny or kings. But the mark beneath her wrist pulsed again, bright and sure, like it was laughing at her denial. By the time they reached the ridge, the storm had quieted into a whisper. Ahead stretched a valley carved entirely from ice. Towers rose from it, some jagged, others shaped like frozen spears, glowing faintly blue under the fractured moonlight. The air shimmered with faint motes of light, as if the stars themselves had fallen and frozen in place. The Frost Keep, Kale said, his voice almost reverent. My home. Iris stared, awe and dread warring inside her. It wasn't a castle. It was a monument. A cathedral built for something older than gods. The walls glowed with veins of light that pulsed like arteries. This doesn't look like a home, she said. It looks like a tomb. Kale dismounted from the sled, landing lightly on the snow. For most, it is. He offered his hand.
Come.
Eira hesitated. Why should I trust you? He didn't blink. Because if I wanted to kill you, I'd have left you with your father. She took his hand. The instant her boots touched the frozen ground of the Frost Keep, the mark on her wrist flared, bright enough to make her gasp. Kale's eyes followed the light, unreadable. It recognizes its home, he murmured. Home, she repeated softly, staring up at the towers of ice. If this is home, Then what was the rest of the world? Forgotten, he said. And soon, perhaps, forbidden. Eira's gaze lingered on him as they passed through the gates. He didn't look back at her, but she felt it, the hum between them, the pull of something old and alive under her skin. She didn't know whether it was protection, possession, or prophecy. But one truth cut through the cold as surely as the wind. Whatever this bond was, it was only just beginning. The gates of the Frostkeep opened with a sound like thunder swallowed by distance. Eira stepped across the threshold, the air around her changing instantly. It was colder here, but a strange, clean cold, sharp enough to taste. The ground glowed faintly beneath her feet, veins of silver light threading through the ice like the veins of some sleeping giant. Cale walked ahead, his cloak trailing behind him like a tide of shadow. He didn't need to command the guards. They moved for him as if drawn by instinct, bowing their heads as he passed. Eira followed, her eyes wide. Every surface shimmered as though carved from frozen glass. But it wasn't dead. The walls moved, a faint, rhythmic pulse, like they were breathing. "What is this place?" she whispered. "The heart of the north," Cale said without turning. "And the last stronghold of my kind." "Your kind," she echoed. He paused at the end of the great hall, where an enormous set of double doors loomed, carved with runes that glowed faintly blue. He rested a hand on them. "The Frostborn. Those bound by the moon's flame. You'll see soon enough." The doors opened on their own, revealing a grand chamber that stole Eira's breath. The ceiling arched high, formed from a single curve of translucent ice that caught the moonlight and scattered it into color. Beneath it stood a long table made of crystal and metal, surrounded by beings that made Eira's skin prickle. They were tall, too tall. Their hair gleamed silver, white, or black-blue like the night sky, and their eyes shone faintly with inner light. They looked human and yet not. Cale's voice broke the silence. "Council," he said simply. The nearest figure, a woman with braids of silver wire woven through her hair, inclined her head. "Alpha." Her gaze slid to Eira. "And this?" Cale stepped aside, revealing Eira fully. "Eira, Thorn of Ravenglade. The mark has awakened in her." A ripple of murmurs followed. One man, a warrior with eyes like shards of ice, leaned forward.
Impossible.
The Linares blood was extinguished when the red moon fell. Eira bristled. "I can still hear you, you know." His mouth curved faintly. "Then perhaps you'll explain how you carry a mark that hasn't appeared in 500 years. "I can't explain what I didn't ask for," she shot back. Cale's gaze flicked to the warrior. "Enough, Varen." Varen bowed stiffly, but didn't hide the distrust in his eyes. Eira glanced between them all, heart pounding. "What do you want from me? You pull me from my home, drag me into a fortress of ice, and now everyone's staring like I'm a ghost. So go on, say it." Cale studied her, his expression unreadable. "You're not a ghost," he said quietly. "You're a reminder." "Of what?" He looked toward the far wall, where a mural shimmered beneath frost. It showed two moons, one white, one red, entwined above a field of fire. Of what was lost when the moons broke apart. She followed his gaze. The mural seemed to shift as she stared, the flames moving faintly, alive beneath the ice. Cale turned back to the council. "Prepare the chambers. She'll stay here until the next lunar turn." The woman with the silver braids frowned. "That's dangerous." "The bond could." Cale's voice cut her off, quiet but final. "I will manage it." The woman hesitated, then bowed. "As you wish, my king." Eira blinked. "King."
Cale didn't respond.
He gestured toward the far end of the hall. "Follow me." The corridors wound endlessly, lit by sconces filled with pale blue fire that gave no smoke and no warmth. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the echo of her footsteps. Servants appeared at the edges of vision, tall, silent figures who bowed but never spoke. They looked at her with curiosity, maybe even fear. Finally, Cale stopped before a door carved with intricate sigils. He pressed his palm against them. The ice beneath his hand glowed, and the door opened soundlessly. Inside, the chamber was vast. Walls of translucent ice rose around a white stone hearth where silver fire burned, flickering like liquid light. A bed covered in fur stood near the center, and in the air, the faint scent of pine and frost lingered. "This will be your room," Kale said. Eira's eyes narrowed. "My room? You make it sound like I asked to stay." "You didn't," he said evenly. "But the bond demands proximity. If you stray too far, it will tear at you." Her pulse quickened. "Tear at me?" He nodded once. "The mark binds through distance. You'll feel it if you fight it. So, I'm a prisoner then." Kale's expression flickered, something almost human crossing his features. "You're alive. That's more than you were an hour ago." She stared at him, anger simmering beneath her exhaustion. "Alive isn't the same as free." "No," he said softly. "It rarely is." He turned toward the door. "Wait," she called after him. "If this bond ties us together, then tell me, what are you to me?" Kale paused at the threshold, his profile sharp against the light. "A shield," he said. "Or a curse, depending on which of us breaks first." Then he was gone, leaving only the whisper of frost and the steady pulse of the firelight. Eira stood there for a long moment, the silence thick enough to drown in. Then, without meaning to, she looked down at her wrist. The mark there pulsed faintly, silver and red, in rhythm with her heartbeat. Only, it didn't feel like her heartbeat. It felt like someone else's, faint and steady, echoing through her veins. She pressed her palm over it, eyes closing. "I'm not yours," she told the silence. But the bond pulsed once in answer, slow, calm, and certain. "Not yet." Eira hadn't slept. The frost keep was too alive for rest. The walls hummed faintly through the night, as though breathing in rhythm with the wind outside. She'd lain beneath furs softer than anything she'd ever touched, staring up at the ceiling where frost traced luminous constellations across the ice. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kale's face, those molten eyes, unreadable and unrelenting. By dawn, her room had filled with a pale blue glow. The hearth fire never dimmed. Its light wasn't warm, only constant, as if mocking her shivers. A knock sounded at her door. Before she could answer, it opened soundlessly, and a woman stepped through, tall, elegant, with hair white as snow and eyes the deep violet of twilight. Her expression was poised, though not unkind. "You are awake," the woman observed. Her voice was cool, calm, every word deliberate. "The Alpha commanded that you be prepared for the Feast of Echoes." Eira blinked. "The what?" The woman approached, placing a folded gown of shimmering fabric on the bed. "A gathering of the Alpha's court. It marks the turning of the moons. You will attend." "I didn't agree to that," Eira said, sitting up. "Or anything, for that matter." The woman's lips curved faintly. "Few here agree to fate before it finds them." She met Eira's gaze. "My name is Nerith. I am the Alpha's steward, and now, it seems, your attendant." "I don't need an attendant." "Then consider me your guide." "Without one, you'll lose yourself before you find the dining hall." Nerith gestured to the gown. "Wear this. The Alpha's patience is selective." Eira looked at the gown. It shimmered between silver and blue, light as spider silk, and when she touched it, warmth spread through her fingertips. "It's too fine." "It's enchanted," Nerith corrected. "The Frost Keep is unforgiving. You'll need its protection more than you'll need modesty." Eira hesitated, but something in Nerith's tone, neither threat nor kindness, made refusal pointless. When she finally dressed, the fabric molded perfectly to her frame. In the mirror of ice near the wall, her reflection startled her. Hair gleaming white in the light, eyes like pale glass. The cursed girl of Ravenglade was gone. Something else looked back. The hall of the Frostkeep was transformed. Long tables of crystal stretched beneath banners woven from wolf fur and moon thread. Flames of silver burned in suspended orbs, drifting lazily through the air. Music hummed low, strange and beautiful, harps of wind and bone. Eira followed Nerith down the length of the hall. The moment she entered, conversation stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her, some curious, some cold. The Frostborn Council, nobles, warriors, and beings she couldn't name sat at the tables. Their gazes glimmered faintly, like predatory light on snow. At the far end sat Kale. He wasn't wearing armor tonight. His tunic was black silk lined with fur, his hair tied back, silver threads catching the light. Yet the air around him was the same, electric, dangerous, absolute. He looked up, and the sound of her footsteps seemed to vanish entirely. "Eira Thorn," he said, her name a command and a greeting in one. She inclined her head stiffly. "You said this wasn't a prison, yet you summoned me like a prisoner. Would you rather I dragged you?" His tone was mild, but his eyes sparked with quiet amusement.
"Seat."
She did, though every muscle stayed taut. The nearest courtiers whispered behind their goblets. A mortal at the Alpha's table. Unthinkable. To Kale's right sat Varen, the warrior from the council. To his left, a woman Eira hadn't seen before, dark-haired, beautiful, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned close to Kale, murmuring something that made him stiffen almost imperceptibly. Nerith leaned toward Eira. "That is Soraya, the Alpha Second. She believes herself your replacement." "Replacement?" Eira asked under her breath. "For what came before," Nerith replied. "You'll learn soon enough." Before Eira could ask more, Kale raised his goblet, his voice cutting through the hall like the crack of ice. "Tonight, we honor survival. The frost has held another turn, the veil still stands, and the bond of moon and fire endures." The crowd murmured approval. Glasses lifted. When Kale's gaze found hers again, something in it shifted, softer, almost questioning.
"Drink," he said.
Eira took the glass in front of her. The liquid inside shimmered faintly blue. It smelled of pine and lightning. "What is it?" "Moon wine," Kale said. "It will warm you." She raised it, meeting his eyes. "If it kills me?" Then the mark chose poorly. His words shouldn't have made her heart stumble, but they did. The feast began. Platters of roasted game and frost fruit appeared, servants moving like ghosts. Conversation resumed, quieter this time. She caught fragments, her name, her mark, Kale's choice. Finally, one of the elders addressed him. "Alpha, if the bond is true, the prophecy must be near. Are you certain she is the one?" Kale's gaze darkened. "The mark burns with Linaris light. There is no doubt." Soraya's voice cut smoothly across his. "Marks can lie. Or worse, be forged." The table fell silent. Eira felt heat rise in her chest. "Forged? You think I branded myself?" Soraya smiled without warmth. "I think the world has many ways to trick desperate men." "Enough," Kale said, the words soft but sharp enough to freeze the air. Frost crept across the rim of his goblet. "Doubt me again in my hall, and I'll remind you how thin mercy is." Soraya inclined her head, but her smile didn't fade. Eira's pulse thudded. The silver fire at her wrist began to stir, faint light flickering beneath her skin. She pressed her palm over it, heart racing. The sensation was strange, hot and cold at once, alive. Kale saw it immediately. "Your mark," he murmured. "It responds to emotion." "Or anger," she said, voice shaking. "Same thing," he replied. The mark pulsed brighter, spilling faint threads of light into the air. The nearby courtiers gasped and drew back. The energy shimmered for a heartbeat, then vanished. Eira exhaled sharply. What was that?" Kale's expression was unreadable. The beginning. Before she could speak again, the music shifted, slow, haunting. The wolves outside began to howl, their song echoing through the frozen walls. The hall dimmed, the moonlight flickering as if in warning. Nerith leaned close to her ear. "Do you feel it?" "What?" "The frost trembling. It means the bond is awakening." Eira turned toward Kale, but he was already looking at her, eyes like liquid silver. Around them, the Frostborn watched, silent and wary. For the first time, Eira realized something she hadn't before. They weren't afraid of her because of Kale. They were afraid of her for him. The howling hadn't stopped. It had started as a distant echo outside the walls, then spread through the frost keep until it seemed to come from inside the stone itself. Even the fire in the hall burned lower, its pale flames flickering blue. Courtiers whispered behind their hands, glancing at the windows as if something might be watching from the snow. Kale rose. "The feast is over."
He didn't shout.
Yet the entire hall froze at once. Servants bowed and began to clear the tables, the music dissolving into silence. Only the wind remained. A steady, mournful breath. Eira stood too, her pulse quickened by something she couldn't name. "What's happening?" Kale's jaw was tight. "Nothing you need fear yet. The frost keep listens to the wind. It warns us when the wild stir." "That's not an answer." He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw strain behind the composure. "It means the veil between worlds is thin tonight. The hunters may be moving." The word hunters tasted wrong in his mouth, like he wasn't speaking of men at all. "Hunters of what?" she asked. "Of you." They left the hall together, footsteps echoing through the frost-lit corridors. The further they went, the dimmer the light became, until only the glow of her mark guided them. Kale stopped at a balcony that overlooked the northern tundra. The landscape beyond was endless. Frozen rivers gleamed like veins of glass, and the moon hung fractured and low, its red half pulsing faintly. It looked close enough to touch, close enough to fall. Eira wrapped the cloak tighter around her shoulders. "You said they hunt me. Why?" Kale's hands rested on the stone railing. "Because of what you carry. The hunters believe the Linares fire can reopen the veil, call back what was banished when the moons broke. They've tried to capture every blood-marked soul born since then. And if they can't capture them, they kill them." The cold bit deeper. She looked down at her wrist, where the light of the mark shimmered faintly beneath her skin. "How many have there been?" Kale's silence was answer enough. "Then why keep me alive?" she pressed. "If I'm a danger to you, to them, why not end it?" He met her gaze, eyes gleaming silver in the moonlight. "Because once someone tried to burn the world to save it. I won't let that happen again." There was history in his voice, something older than guilt, older than grief. The weight of centuries. Eira wanted to ask who was she, but his expression made her stop. "Instead," she whispered, "then what happens to me? You learn to control it. And if I can't," Kale turned back to the horizon, "then I'll do what must be done." That night, she dreamed of fire. The ice beneath her melted, the sky bled red, and the voice that had haunted her since childhood whispered through the dark. "Daughter of the shattered moon, why do you hide from your light?" She woke gasping, sweat freezing on her skin. The silver fire beneath her wrist was blazing bright enough to illuminate the room. When she moved, the walls pulsed in answer. The door opened. Kale stepped inside, cloak half thrown over his shoulders. He looked at her mark and stiffened. "It's happening faster than I thought." Eira backed away. "What's happening?" "The bond. It's responding to the moon. Make it stop." He approached carefully, palms raised. "You have to breathe. The fire inside you doesn't know friend from foe. It feeds on fear." "I'm not afraid," she snapped, but her voice shook. "Yes, you are," he said quietly. "You've been afraid your entire life. You think fear is weakness, but it's the fire's language." The light flared, bathing the room in silver and crimson. The heat was unbearable. She sank to her knees, trembling. "Kale, it burns." He reached her in 2 strides and caught her wrists. The moment his skin touched hers, the mark steadied, dimming until only a faint pulse remained. The air cooled. Eira's breath came ragged and shallow. Kale knelt before her, eyes searching hers. "Better?" Her voice was a whisper. "Why does it listen to you?" "Because we share the bond now." His thumb brushed over the mark once, tracing the curve of the crescent. "It recognizes its other half." She stared at him, confusion and something sharper tangled in her chest. "So, you mean I can't control it without you?" "For now," he said. "But you'll learn." She tried to pull back, but his hand stayed on hers, steady, grounding. "And when I do?" she asked softly. What happens then? He smiled faintly, though his eyes looked tired. Then I'm finally free of the gods' joke. What joke? That they made me the alpha, who could never rule alone. Eira's pulse fluttered. You mean? I mean you were never supposed to die in Ravenglade, he said. You were supposed to find me. The fire chose its keeper long before you were born. A low boom echoed through the keep, shaking the walls.
Cale was on his feet instantly.
What was that? She whispered. He turned toward the window, eyes narrowing. Outside, streaks of red light cut across the snow, burning torches moving fast. The howling had returned, louder, closer. And beneath it, the distinct clang of steel. The hunters, he said. Eira's blood ran cold. How did they find us? They always find fire, he murmured. Then louder. Stay here. Do not follow. He was already gone, sword drawn, the door slamming behind him. Eira stood motionless for a breath. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant clash of battle and the call of the wolves. She should have stayed, should have hidden, but the mark on her wrist pulsed once, hard. She felt Cale's heartbeat inside her, heavy, uneven, strained. The bond tugged at her, a pull deeper than instinct. Pain bloomed in her chest. He's hurt. Eira grabbed the nearest cloak, threw it over her shoulders, and ran. She followed the sound through twisting corridors until she reached the outer ramparts. The cold bit into her lungs. Below, the courtyard was chaos, wolves clashing with men in dark armor, steel meeting fang and flame. The hunters' weapons burned with runes that glowed crimson against the snow. And in the center of it all, Cale fought like the storm given flesh. Every strike of his blade froze the air. Every breath steamed like fire. But there were too many. Cale, she shouted. He looked up, eyes flashing silver. And in that instant, one of the hunters lunged behind him. Eira didn't think. The mark erupted in light, the silver fire bursting from her palms. It leapt from the balcony in an arc, striking the hunter mid-charge. The explosion was silent, brilliant. When the light faded, nothing was left but ash drifting on the wind. Every movement below stopped. Cale turned toward her, breath visible, eyes wide. You shouldn't have come, he said. I didn't, she answered, chest heaving. The fire did. Smoke still hung over the courtyard when dawn came. Eira stood at the edge of the balcony, her hands trembling. The snow below was scorched in streaks of black and silver where her fire had touched it. The air still tasted of ash. The hunters' bodies had vanished with the rising sun. Their weapons melted into slag, leaving only faint red stains in the snow. Cale returned from the field silent, his armor dented and darkened. The wolves that survived padded behind him, heads low, eyes glowing faintly blue. He looked up at Eira, and for a moment she saw it. Fatigue, sorrow, and something like awe. You shouldn't have intervened, he said when he reached her. Eira met his gaze. You'd be dead if I hadn't, perhaps. But you risked yourself. She laughed once bitterly. You risked me first, when you dragged me from my home. Cale's jaw tightened. And now you'd rather I'd left you there to die? The words cut sharper than steel. Eira turned away, her pulse hammering. Maybe that would have been simpler. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. Simple isn't survival. Neither is being someone's weapon. Cale flinched, not visibly, but enough for her to notice. Then, quieter. You think I see you as that? I think you see me as a prophecy you can control. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was soft, almost tired. Prophecies aren't controlled, Eira. They're endured. Later, she found him in the great hall, speaking with Nerith. The steward's tone was clipped, her expression grim. They knew exactly where to strike, Nerith said. Our wards were breached from within. Someone here, open the gate. Cale's expression darkened. Soraya. Nerith inclined her head. The lady vanished before the attack began. Eira froze in the doorway. You think she betrayed you? Cale didn't turn. I don't think. I know. Nerith glanced toward Eira, her violet eyes flickering. The girl must begin training immediately. The next blood moon rises within 7 nights. If the mark remains unstable, she will learn, Kale said. From me. Nerith hesitated. That's not wise. I wasn't asking, he replied. Prepare the sanctum. Eira stepped forward. What's the sanctum? Kale finally looked at her. The place where the Linares fire is born and tested. The sanctum lay beneath the Frostkeep, carved into the roots of the mountain itself. It was a cathedral of ice and light, its walls alive with runes that pulsed in time with Eira's heartbeat as they entered. At the center, a pool of frozen water reflected the broken moon through an opening in the ceiling high above. This is where the first bond was forged, Kale said quietly. Where the Frostborn were made. Eira stared at the ice beneath her boots. The reflections in it didn't match the present. They moved differently, like memories trapped under glass. Kale removed his gloves, baring his hands. The faint silver lines that traced his veins glowed brighter as he stepped closer. You'll have to trust me.
I don't, she said.
He almost smiled. That's a start. He extended his hand. After a long moment, she took it. The air changed instantly. The mark on her wrist flared, blindingly bright, and warmth flooded her veins. Not gentle warmth but searing, alive, like the inside of a star. She gasped, gripping his hand tighter. The ice beneath them shimmered, light rippling outward in concentric circles. What's happening? She breathed. Your power is answering mine. Don't fight it. I'm not. She cried out as fire burst from her palms, coiling through the air like ribbons of light. It should have burned, but instead it felt like release, like exhaling after years of silence. The flames spiraled upward, striking the ceiling and scattering shards of ice. Kale's voice cut through the roar. Focus. The fire is alive. It reflects what you feel. Eira's chest heaved. Then what do I do? Breathe. He stepped closer, his voice lower now. Let it listen. Don't command it, invite it. Her pulse slowed. The wild light began to steady, the ribbons drawing inward until the fire hovered between their joined hands, a small, perfect sphere of molten silver and red.
Kal's gaze met hers.
Good. The fire pulsed once. The bond between them thrummed like a living thread. Eira could feel his heartbeat inside her chest, strong, certain, terrifying. For one impossible moment, the entire sanctum seemed to breathe with them. Then the sphere of fire dissolved, leaving only steam and silence. Eira swayed. Kale caught her before she could fall. You did well, he murmured. She was trembling, her voice barely a whisper. It felt like drowning. It is drowning, he said, until you learn to swim. When they left the sanctum, the corridors of the Frostkeep were filled with low murmurs. Courtiers bowed as they passed, but their eyes followed Eira with something new, not contempt, not even curiosity.
Fear.
Outside, the moon had begun to bleed again, a thin crimson line along its edge. Eira touched her wrist, the mark still faintly glowing through her skin. You said the next blood moon is 7 nights away. Kale nodded. When it rises, the veil weakens. The hunters won't stop. And if the prophecy is true, neither will the fire. What prophecy? She asked. He stopped walking. The shadows stretched long around them, and for once, he didn't look like a king, only a man burdened by memory. That the child born under the broken moon would either seal the darkness forever or become it. Eira's breath caught. And you think I'm that child? I don't think, Kale said softly. The mark decided. That night, Eira couldn't sleep. She stood by her window, watching the sky bleed red over the tundra. The bond thrummed faintly, a steady pulse she could feel in her veins. She pressed her hand to her heart. Far below, on the battlements, she saw Kale standing alone in the snow. The wind tore through his hair, his cloak whipping like a banner. He looked up once, toward her window. Their eyes met across the distance. No words passed between them. None were needed. The bond pulsed once more, stronger this time. Heat and frost twined together, and Eira knew sleep would never come again. Snow fell in soft spirals that morning, whispering against the window panes like ghosts pressing their hands to the glass. Eira watched it from the training grounds, her breath a pale mist in the frozen air. The courtyard had been cleared of snow except for a ring at its center, a circle of etched runes that glowed faintly blue, shifting in rhythm with her pulse. Cale stood opposite her, barehanded, no armor this time. His cloak had been discarded, the faint silver lines beneath his skin pulsing faintly, echoing her own mark. "This," he said, gesturing to the runes, "is where we begin. The circle channels the frost light. It will contain your fire if it breaks loose." Eira flexed her hands. "You make it sound like a wild animal." He met her gaze. "It is." "Then maybe I shouldn't be learning to control it." Cale tilted his head slightly, the faintest trace of amusement crossing his face. "Would you rather it control you?" She hesitated, then shook her head.
No.
"Then listen." He stepped closer, the air between them thickening with the electric hum that always followed him. "The fire inside you doesn't respond to orders. It responds to intent.
To instinct.
Fear it, and it will feed. Trust it, and it will serve." Eira's voice was barely a whisper. "And if I fail?" Cale's eyes gleamed silver. "Then I burn with you." The first lesson began at dawn and ended long past dusk. Cale pushed her until her arms shook, until every breath came ragged and raw. He had her summon the fire again and again, each time forcing her to feel rather than fight it. When the flames slipped beyond her control, he was there, always, his voice steady, grounding her, the touch of his hand at her wrist cooling the storm. But with every spark, she felt something deeper awaken. The fire wasn't just power, it was memory. Echoes of things she'd never lived, battlefields under twin moons, silver wolves running through rivers of flame, a woman's scream that wasn't her own. By the third day, her temper had begun to fray.
"This isn't learning," she snapped.
"It's torment." Cale's expression didn't change. "The fire feeds on defiance. If you hate it, it will hate you." She clenched her fists. "Then what do you expect me to feel?" He stepped closer until their breath mingled in the cold. Acceptance. Their eyes locked, and the air between them shimmered faintly, heat clashing with frost. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might close the distance entirely. Instead, he turned away. "You're afraid of what it means," he said quietly. "I'm afraid of what I'll become." Cale glanced back over his shoulder. "Then you're wiser than most who carry the mark." That night, exhaustion drove her to the library at the heart of the Frost Keep. Shelves carved from ice stretched higher than she could see, every book bound in silver-threaded leather. She lit a small blue flame in her palm, one she'd learned to control, and wandered through the aisles. The texts whispered faintly as she passed. One in particular caught her eye, Chronicles of the Twin Moons. The pages were brittle, ink faded to gray. She turned them carefully, scanning the lines until one passage stopped her breath. When the red moon shattered, its shards fell as fire upon the snow. From them were born the moon-marked, children who carried both ruin and salvation in their veins. One to seal, one to destroy. Eira read the words again, slower. One to seal, one to destroy. Her chest tightened. Was that what Cale feared? That she might be the second one? She turned the page, and a name appeared in the text, carved deeper than ink. Saren of Frostvale, the last moonborn before her. The name felt familiar. Beneath it was a line that made her blood run cold. She burned her bond to ash beneath the blood moon's rise. The alpha who loved her fell with her flame. Eira slammed the book shut. When she found Cale the next morning, he was standing in the courtyard again, the storm whipping around him. She didn't bother with formality. "You knew about her." His eyes flicked toward her, unreadable.
"Who?" "Saren.
"The moonborn before me. She was your bond, wasn't she?" A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of snow. Finally, Cale said, "Yes." The word landed heavy, colder than the wind. Eira's stomach twisted. What happened to her? "She lost herself," he said simply. "The fire consumed her. I severed the bond before it could consume the world." Eira stared at him. You killed her. No, Kale said, his voice low, breaking slightly at the edges. I let her die. Silence fell. The snow swirled between them, soft and cruel. Eira turned away, her throat tight. And now you think I'll end the same way?
Kale didn't deny it.
Then why keep me here? She demanded. Why save me at all? He took a step toward her. Because I couldn't save her. Something in his voice cracked. Raw, human, unbearable. Eira blinked back a sting of tears she didn't want to feel. I'm not her. I know, he said quietly. But the fire doesn't. 4 days, they trained in silence. Kale was harder on her now, his movements sharper, his words clipped. But every time she stumbled, his hand was there, steady and sure. Every time her fire flared, he matched it with frost until both balanced in perfect opposition. Until one night, when the sky itself changed. Eira looked up from the circle of runes as the fractured moon turned red, its light spilling across the tundra like blood. Kale froze. It's early. What's happening? She whispered. The blood moon rises, he said. The veil is thinning faster than it should. Eira's mark flared in answer. The pain this time was sharper, deeper, alive. She gasped and doubled over. Kale, it hurts. He caught her, pulling her against his chest. His breath brushed her ear, rough and desperate. Don't fight it. Let it burn through me. What? No. But his hand was already on her wrist, the fire leaping from her skin into his. Light burst between them, white, red, and gold all at once. The snow around them melted, steam rising like mist. Eira felt his heartbeat in hers, faster, stronger, until there was no telling them apart. The moon above them pulsed once, and the world held its breath. The frost keep shuddered, not from wind, nor quake, but from something deeper, an echo in the bones of the mountain itself. Eira felt it through Kale's grip, a tremor that ran from the stone into her blood. The fire inside her flared, reacting instinctively to the disturbance. Kale's gaze snapped toward the northern wall. She's opened the gates. Who? Eira breathed. Soraya. His tone was all steel now, sharp and cold. She's not running from us. She's letting something in. The crimson light outside deepened until the snow itself glowed with it. The blood moon swelled huge on the horizon, its broken edge burning like a wound. The wolves began to howl again, but this time their song wasn't a warning. It was mourning. Kale drew his sword. Its silver edge drank the red light and turned black. Stay close, he said. He didn't need to repeat it. The air in the corridors was already changing, hot, metallic, heavy with the scent of iron. They passed warriors braced for battle, pale eyes reflecting the same terror Eira felt clawing at her ribs. Frost-born soldiers, creatures born of cold and silence, yet now they trembled. At the gates, the truth of Kale's fear became flesh. The doors of the Frostkeep hung open, ice splintered into jagged shards. A storm of red mist curled beyond the threshold, seeping into the courtyard like smoke that bled. Shapes moved inside it, humanoid at first, then dissolving into twisted silhouettes. Wraiths. Dozens of them, their bodies rippling like shadows trapped underwater. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, not with life, but hunger. Kale stepped forward, blade lifted. Seal the gates. The soldiers obeyed, but the wraiths moved faster, pouring through the breach in a tide of darkness. The first one struck, its claws slicing through a man's armor like parchment. His scream was short, cut off as frost spread across his skin, turning him to ice. Eira's instinct screamed run, but the bond roared louder. The fire inside her pulsed in answer to Kale's rising fury. She could feel his heartbeat through it, steady, commanding, unyielding. Stay back, he shouted. No, she said, and her voice wasn't hers anymore. It was the fire speaking. Light burst from her palms. White flames shot through the courtyard, arcing across the wraiths in ribbons of heat. The first creature shrieked as it was swallowed whole. The others faltered, retreating for an instant, but the light dimmed as quickly as it came. Eira stumbled. I can't hold it. Kale was beside her, his sword sweeping upward, cleaving through another wraith. The impact threw sparks of silver that clung to her fire, making it blaze brighter.
Then don't hold it, he said.
Shape it.
How?
He seized her wrist, pressing her palm toward the ground. Through me. The bond flared. Heat surged from her chest, coursing down her arm, through his hand, and into the earth. The runes beneath their feet ignited. The fire and frost intertwined, white light spiraling upward into the red sky. For a heartbeat, the storm froze midair. Every wraith screamed. When the light faded, the courtyard was still. Eira gasped, chest heaving. Kale's sword was embedded in the ground beside them, steam rising from its edge. But victory was short-lived. A slow clap echoed from the gates. The sound was deliberate.
Human.
Soraya stepped from the mist, her gown torn, her lips curved in a smile that didn't belong to the woman Eira had met days before. Her eyes glowed faintly crimson.
Well done, she said.
The fire favors you more than I expected. Kale's voice was pure venom. What have you done? Soraya tilted her head, amused. What you never had the courage to do. I gave the veil what it wanted, a key. Eira felt her pulse spike. A key? Soraya's gaze slid toward her. You little moon spawn. You are the door and the lock. But every lock opens if you use the right blood. She lifted her hand. In her palm gleamed a crystal shard, red as the broken moon. Energy pulsed within it like a living thing. Kale's expression turned to horror. That's a fragment of the moonstone. You ripped it from the seal. Someone had to. Soraya's voice softened almost tenderly. You've ruled too long by fear, Kale. The Frostborn deserve more than silence and decay. The fire can bring life back, if you let it burn. That fire consumes worlds, Kale said. Only if you resist it. Her eyes met Eira's. Tell me, girl. Doesn't it whisper to you? Doesn't it promise freedom? Eira's mark throbbed painfully, as though the fire inside her answered the call. The voice that haunted her dreams stirred, low and hungry. Daughter of the shattered moon, come home. Eira clutched her wrist, shaking. Stop. Soraya smiled. You hear it, don't you? The same song that called to Saren before she burned the sky. The voice beneath the veil. It's older than the moons, older than the gods. It's truth. Kale stepped between them, blade raised. She won't listen to you. Soraya's laughter cut through the air like shattered glass. She already is. She raised the moonstone fragment and drove it into the ground. The impact sent a shockwave through the courtyard. Ice splintered, cracks racing outward like veins of lightning. From within those fissures, red light bled into the snow. The wraiths reformed, hundreds now, their screams rising into the air as the veil itself began to tear. Kale lunged, but Soraya vanished into the mist. The gate exploded in light. Eira was thrown backward. Kale caught her mid-fall, shielding her from the shards of ice that rained down. When the glare faded, the horizon beyond the Frostkeep was gone, swallowed by a swirling rift of crimson and black. The air pulsed with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. The veil, Kale whispered. It's open. Eira looked up at him, terror dawning in her chest. Then we can close it. You said my fire can. Not without the other half, he said grimly. Not without the moonstone she took. A rumble shook the ground, deep and resonant. Kale's grip tightened on her arm. She's headed for the blood pass. If she fuses that shard with the seal, she'll unleash what's behind it. What's behind it? Eira demanded. He met her eyes. The silver in them had gone pale with dread. The first shadow, he said quietly. The one the gods couldn't kill. By the time they reached the edge of the Frostkeep's walls, the snowstorm had turned red. The rift pulsed on the horizon like a second moon rising from the earth. The wolves howled below, their cries drowned out by the hum of something vast and waking. Kale turned to her. You don't have to follow me. Eira stared at him. You already know I will. He nodded once. Then remember this. If we fail, there won't be a world left to burn. She glanced toward the bleeding sky. The mark on her wrist burned so bright it lit the snow. Then we don't fail. The world beyond the Frost Keep was unrecognizable. The tundra that had once stretched white and endless now bled red beneath the broken sky. Snow turned to ash where it touched the ground. The air shimmered, thick with the hum of magic too ancient to belong to mortals. Each gust of wind carried whispers, voices layered over each other, speaking in tongues Eira didn't understand but somehow felt in her bones. They rode through the storm in silence. Kale led the way, his cloak snapping behind him like torn shadow. The wolves pulling the sled were restless, their breath steaming silver, their eyes rolling white. Even they could feel it, the pulse of something vast waking beneath the ice. When the blood pass came into view, Eira's breath caught. The mountains rose like jagged spears, their peaks glowing faintly crimson under the fractured moon. At the center of the pass, the earth was split open. The rift pulsed with red light, spreading wider with every heartbeat. And there, at the edge of that wound, stood Soraya. She no longer looked entirely human. Her skin glowed faintly, veins pulsing with moonlight turned to poison. In her hands, the shard of the moonstone blazed like a miniature sun. Kale drew his sword, his voice a low snarl. Soraya. She turned, smiling. You're too late, my king. Whatever you think you're awakening. I'm not awakening it, she said. I'm freeing it. Eira felt the fire inside her twist, flare, answer. The voice returned, whispering in the recesses of her mind. Daughter of flame, child of ruin. Open the door. She clutched her wrist. It's calling me again. Kale didn't take his eyes off Soraya. Ignore it. I can't. Then listen, he said sharply. But remember who you are. Soraya raised the shard. She doesn't know who she is, Kale. You've kept her in chains, fed her lies. Tell her the truth. Tell her whose fire burns in her blood. Eira's pulse spiked. What truth? Kale's silence was enough. Soraya laughed softly. Oh, he didn't tell you. Of course he didn't. He wanted your power, not your understanding. Soraya, Kale warned. But the woman ignored him. Her eyes glowed brighter, and when she spoke, her voice echoed, not just through the air but through Eira's mind. You are no mortal, Eira. You are the heir of the fire that shattered the red moon, the daughter of the one the gods named Devourer. The words hit like a blow. Eira staggered back. No. Why do you think the fire obeys you? Soraya asked gently. Why do you think it never burned you alive? It knows its master. You were born to finish what she began. Kale's expression hardened. Enough. Enough. Soraya's laughter turned wild. You should have told her. You thought love could tame her bloodline? You're a fool, Kale. Just as you were with Saren. Eira's stomach twisted. You loved her, didn't you? Kale looked at her, eyes dark with centuries of guilt. I tried to save her. Soraya spread her arms. And failed. As you will again. The fire doesn't want saving, it wants release. She drove the shard into the ground. The rift screamed. The air fractured like glass, ripples of crimson tearing through the snow. From the center of the wound rose a shadow taller than the cliffs themselves, vast, formless, with eyes like suns gone black. The sound it made wasn't a roar, but a chorus of every voice that had ever prayed to the moons and been forgotten. The Devourer. Kale's sword flared to life, its silver light trembling against the dark. Get back. Eira couldn't move. The shadow reached for her, not with hands, but with memory. Images flooded her mind, cities burning, skies turning to fire, gods screaming as their temples fell. And through it all, a woman with hair of white flame and eyes of gold. Her face almost, but not quite, Eira's own. Her mother. The fire in her wrist exploded outward. Kale shouted her name, but the sound was lost in the storm. Light and shadow collided, sending a shockwave that leveled the snowfields. The wolves howled and scattered. The mountains themselves groaned under the weight of the power unleashed. Soraya laughed through the chaos, her voice echoing like the wind through shattered glass. Yes. Let it in, child of fire. Let the world remember what it lost. Kale fought through the gale, his cloak shredded, his blade glowing bright enough to blind. He reached her just as the fire began to spiral out of control, wrapping around her like a living storm. His hand found her wrist, burning, searing, yet he didn't let go. Eira, look at me. Her eyes snapped open, two pools of molten gold. I can't stop it. You don't have to, he shouted. Just share it. The bond ignited. Fire poured from her into him, frost from him into her. Two forces that had warred for centuries now colliding and entwining. The air turned white with heat and light. The devourer shrieked, recoiling from the fusion. Soraya's triumphant smile faltered. The fire spoke through Eira's mouth. You are not my mother. The flames turned pure, radiant gold. The devourer screamed louder, its form unraveling at the edges. Kale's voice was low, fierce. Now, Eira. The seal. She understood, without words. Together they thrust their hands toward the rift. Fire and frost collided one final time, forming a blinding burst of silver light. The shockwave tore through the pass, freezing the crimson mist in midair before shattering it to dust. The devourer roared and vanished. When the light faded, only silence remained. The rift was gone. The sky was pale once more. The blood moon, fractured and faint, began to mend. Soraya lay on the ground, her body half buried in ash. Eira approached, trembling. The woman looked up at her, eyes no longer red but glassy with exhaustion. Do you think you've won? She whispered. The fire doesn't sleep forever. Kale stepped forward, his expression carved from grief. No, he said softly. But this time, it burns for the right reason. Soraya smiled faintly, something almost human. Then you'd better pray it doesn't learn to dream. Her body dissolved into embers, scattered by the wind. Eira stood frozen. The fire inside her still blazed, too bright, too alive. Her heart beat in Kale's rhythm. She turned toward him, voice shaking. What am I now? Kale sheathed his sword, stepping close enough for her to feel the cold rolling off him. You are what the moons feared most. Her breath hitched. And that is. He reached out, brushed his thumb across the mark on her wrist. It glowed faintly gold beneath his touch. Balance, he said. Fire and frost, bound in one heart. Eira looked up at the sky. The moon's shards drifted closer, silver light bleeding into the dawn. And the prophecy? Kale's mouth curved faintly. Prophecies end. Choices don't. The wind howled across the mountains, carrying the scent of snow and blood and something reborn. But far beneath the ice, where no light reached, something stirred again. A pulse of red, faint and patient. The devourer was gone.
For now.
The storm had gone silent. No wind. No wolves. No heartbeat but hers and his, echoing in the hollow quiet of the blood pass. The world, for the first time since she could remember, was still. Eira stood in the ruin of the battlefield, surrounded by frozen echoes of what once was, the burned snow, the shattered earth, the faint shimmer of ash where Soraya had fallen. The air smelled of iron and frost, heavy and strange. Kale's sword lay half-buried nearby, its silver edge dull, its light gone. She turned to him. He was kneeling, one hand pressed against the ice, the other clutching his side. Blood, dark and iridescent, seeped through his fingers, steaming faintly against the cold. Kale, she whispered, rushing to him. You're hurt. He tried to smile. It came out like a breath. It's nothing. You're bleeding, she said, kneeling beside him. The bond can heal. Not this. His eyes flickered open, the silver in them dimmer than she had ever seen. When I took your fire into me, it burned through the frost in my veins. The curse that kept me alive, it's unraveling. Her throat closed.
No.
No, I can fix this. I'll pour it back into you. Kale caught her wrist before she could. If you do that, the veil will break again. I don't care. You must. His voice was hoarse but steady. The seal holds because the fire stays with you. If you give it back, it'll unmake everything we just saved. Eira shook her head violently, tears freezing on her cheeks. You can't ask me to let you die. I'm not asking, he said softly. I'm telling you what's already been decided. No, she whispered again. Not this time.
Not you.
Kale reached up, fingers brushing the side of her face, cold against her burning skin. You were never meant to be my ending, Eira. You were my beginning. The words broke something open inside her. She caught his hand in both of hers, pressed it against her chest. Then stay. Stay, and see what you started. I can't. His gaze lifted to the sky, to the fractured moon above them. Its red scars were fading, silver light spilling over the mountains like dawn. Do you see it? The world remembers how to heal. I don't want the world, she choked out. I want you. He smiled then, a real smile, soft and weary. Then carry me with you. The bond pulsed once, a single radiant beat of silver and gold. Eira felt it sear into her heart, warm and unbearable, before fading into stillness. Kale's body went weightless in her arms. His breath stopped. For a moment, she couldn't breathe either. Then the sky changed. The fractured moon flared white, whole and brilliant for the first time in centuries. Its light poured over the land, touching every shadow, every scar. The rift that had split the mountains sealed shut with a sound like a sigh. The frost bloomed again, clean and alive. Kale's body shimmered faintly, his form dissolving into threads of light that drifted upward, carried by the wind. They rose toward the moon until they vanished into its glow. Eira knelt in the snow long after he was gone, her hands empty, her heart blazing. Days passed. Maybe weeks. Time in the Frost Keep no longer moved the way it once had. The fortress stood silent, its halls half-empty, its fires cold. Nerith and the others had buried their dead and rebuilt what they could. The wolves patrolled the tundra, their howls softer now, songs of mourning, not warning. And in the highest tower, Eira stood before the great window overlooking the world. She wore Kale's cloak around her shoulders. The mark on her wrist no longer burned but pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Every night, she looked up at the mended moon, waiting to feel his presence again. Sometimes she swore she could hear it, a whisper in the wind, the faint echo of his voice. You are the flame, Eira, but you are also the light. The words came to her in dreams, in the shimmer of frost across the glass, in the stillness between breaths. The fire inside her was no longer wild. It obeyed her now, not as a weapon, not as a curse, but as a part of her soul. She could feel the world's heartbeat through it, steady and slow. When the first dawn finally broke, pale and silver, she stepped out onto the balcony. The snow glittered beneath her feet, melting where she walked. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of her reflection in the ice. She wasn't the cursed girl from Ravenglade anymore. She was Eira of the Frostfire, the Alpha's chosen, the keeper of the veil, the flame that survived. And as the light of the mended moon spilled across the mountains, a soft voice rode the wind. Low, familiar, eternal. Together always. She smiled, tears glinting like crystals. Always. Then she turned toward the horizon, where the first true sunrise in 1,000 years was breaking through the clouds, and began to walk. Each step left behind a trail of melting frost and blooming light. Each heartbeat carried two rhythms, one hers, one that would never fade. Because even though the Alpha King was gone, his promise burned in every breath she took, in every spark of the fire that would never die. And beneath the dawn of the silver fire, the world began again. In the end, she was never just the cursed girl beneath a fractured moon. She was the flame that remade the dark, the spark that loved even when the night demanded silence. And though the Alpha King's voice has faded into the wind, his promise still lingers, in every heartbeat, in every breath that warms the frost. Together, always. If stories like this stir something inside you, if you believe that love can rise from ashes, that light can be born in even the coldest dark. Then join us. Subscribe for more dark fantasy love stories, tales where fate burns bright, and every ending hides the spark of a new beginning.